Good afternoon. Standing to my left is Dr. Yasser Shabazz, daughter of Malcolm and Betty Shabazz, and Malak Shabazz, daughter of Malcolm and Betty Shabazz. To the left of Dr. Yasser is the mayor of the city of New York, Eric Adams, and to the right of Malak is the Attorney General of Black America, Ben Crump. Assigned us is the legal team. Let me say that 100 years ago today, Malcolm X was born. And the centennial of his birth is being celebrated all over the country. But we wanted to celebrate it in Harlem, in different places. Tonight at the Shabazz Center will be a gala. But I wanted to have this press conference with the mayor at the House of Justice because Malcolm was bigger than just one group and one place. I grew up in the Martin Luther King movement here in New York. At 13, I became youth director to that chapter. The mayor grew up in the House of the Lord with Bishop Daughtry. We worked and marched together for many years. Many people tried to, in the media, isolate Malcolm. But Malcolm, even though there may have been tactical differences sometimes, Malcolm's goals was the same goals as Dr. King's and everyone else. The media tried to play the game of one against the other, when it was really, if you had a sports analogy, it was who was going to be the point guard and who was going to be the blocker. And that was about our, as a world, gaining. Don't ever forget, it was Malcolm that globalized the struggle, took us all over the world, and made it more than just civil rights, which we needed and still need, but also human rights on an international level. It was Malcolm that talked about the Bandung Conference. It was Malcolm that talked about us relating to Africa. It was Malcolm that formed the OAAU, Organization of African American Unity, and wanted to build an umbrella for all of us. So there's no one part that owns Malcolm, and there's no one part that speaks totally as Malcolm's spokesperson other than his family. I was blessed that when I was surprisingly called by Dr. Betty Shabazz, she was working at that time at Merge1 College, and she called me and told me to come to her office. And I came to her office, and she said, Reverend Al, your daughters are now 3 and 4 years old. I said, yes. She says, they have to go to school next year. I said, yes. She said, take them over to Johnson Preparatory School. I said, that's a private school. She said, yeah, I know. I said, well, I can't afford a private school. She said, I paid for the first 2 years. She said, people had to help me with my daughters, and I don't want your daughters to have to be the name Sharpton in a public school. And we became close ever since then. So she was the godmother to my daughters, even though we came out the King movement. We used to meet, Dr. Shabazz and I, Malak, don't hit me for saying this, but I'm gonna say it. We used to meet at the Wilson's Chickens and Waffle, and used to joke that we were on a diet. This was diet syrup on our pancake. But I will never forget how she told me one day how viciously they killed her husband. She said, what you don't know, Al, he spent the night at the New York Hilton. He got a call threatening him that morning saying, brother, your time is up. He drove up to Harlem, to where we'd be tonight at the Audubon, and parked several blocks away and walked to the Audubon, giving them every opportunity. She said, but they didn't want to give him the dignity of that. They wanted to shoot him in front of his family. She said, I was sitting on the front row, and they took one of my daughter's dolls as a prop, and then they came down and stood over him and unloaded the guns. And I saw his body jumping. She was in Dr. Shabazz' stomach. He never got to see Malak and her twin. That's how vicious this was. And there's always been those that contend that law enforcement in New York did not do enough to deal with the hurt of this family and the protection of Malcolm X. That's why on his 100th anniversary, the family and the mayor of New York have engaged in conversations on how we can deal with the New York City trying to deal with whatever happened on February 21st, 1965. Eric and I grew up in the shadows of Malcolm. And if this generation that produced him as mayor can get to the bottom of what happened and deal with what is right for the family, the city owes Malcolm, the nation owes Malcolm, the world owes Malcolm, and we need to do that for his children. So I wanted to have this so the mayor and the daughters and the attorneys could address you. But we intend on his celebration to also deal with what happened and deal with continuing the mission and continuing the vision of Malcolm X. Malcolm gave us our pride. He gave us our dignity. He made us world citizens. Before we knew who Mandela was, we knew who Malcolm was. Amen. And he made us stand up erect and hold our heads held high. And we could not honor him without honoring Dr. Betty Shabazz, who was the wind between his wings. Before hearing from the mayor and Attorney Crump, I want us to hear from Dr. Ilyasah Shabazz and then Malak, and then we'll hear from the mayor.
You know, when it was in the 1950s, when young people were marching, demonstrating, and protesting, asking for civil rights, wanting to integrate schools and so forth, and my father came along just in his 20s, and he said, we demand our human rights as your brother. We demand our human rights as ordained by God. And he introduced, for the first time, a human rights agenda to the civil rights movement. And so we are here looking for truth and justice for our father, for our mother, and for the African diaspora and all other peoples around the world.
And because of my mother and father, I became an international human rights activist at the United Nations. And because of that, all of us need to know that we are African for Africans.
Mayor of the City of New York, Mayor Eric Adams.
Thank you so much, Reverend Sharpton and the families and Ben for being here today. You know, as I was listening to Reverend Sharpton, I couldn't help but to reflect that this is a professional moment, but it's also a personal moment for me. The professional moment is to be very clear. Lean on me also. The professional moment is to, let's be clear, as I heard someone say the other day, that post-trauma is something that happened in the past. We're not past. This family is still suffering. Although the physical bullet hit the body of our brother Malcolm, the emotional anatomy continues to rip apart the anatomy of the emotional impact of this family. You know, to be carried by your mother while your mother experienced trauma, that trauma also goes to the baby that she's carrying, the twins that she was carrying. Wow. And for those daughters to be in the room and watch the physical assassination of their dad, with so many stories untold. We have to complete the chapter, and I believe that God made it possible for that chapter to be completed while I'm the mayor of the city of New York. I think that's extremely important. And we have to be honest in our analysis. I know we said, the words are they who killed and assassinated Malcolm. Be clear, these are not just who was in the ballroom at the time. There were many hands that were in place. That's right. Amen. And that's why this becomes such a powerful moment of the personal part of it. Just yesterday, I was talking about where we are. And many people want to rewrite history. The goal was to publicly lynch and assassinate Malcolm like so many of our leaders. And many people have asked me of what I'm going through right now. Why would the federal government ever do something to you if you did nothing wrong? Ask Malcolm, ask Dr. King, ask the Black Panthers, ask Maulana Karenga, ask Nick, ask Stokely Carmichael. There is the DNA of the history of dismantling Black leaders throughout the annals of history. And we have to be honest about that. And when you start to look at the documents that are now being released from our federal authorities and look at some of the horrific behavior that focus on Malcolm, that focus on our leaders during that time, creating conflict and division between them. The long history of that is real and honest. And I am just extremely filled with pride and joy to stand with his two daughters and to sit down with the family's attorney, the people's attorney, to fight to ensure that we can get justice. The emotional pathway of that bullet must stop in this generation. And we can all do it together. There's so much we can do to uplift Malcolm's name. And it's more than placing an X on your cap. It is about finishing the work that Malcolm was doing. What he was doing for human rights issues in the United Nations, how he was standing up to make sure those who were elected for office and participated in the process was doing what's right. And I'm proud to look at some of the things he called for, the billions of dollars we put in MWBE, my trips up at Rikers Island to speak to our young future Malcolms who are incarcerated, to be rebaptized by Reverend Sharpton among the inmates, to say to them that there's a Malcolm in them. To visit our schools and our homeless shelters. There are Malcolms that are right now waiting for people to lift them up. And so not only do I want to conclude the history of this pain, but I want to live like Malcolm lived. I want to be clear. I don't want to be like Mike. I want to be like Malcolm. That's what I want to be like. And so I thank Nan. I thank this family. Because trust me when I tell you, when you lose a loved one in the capacity that we lost Brother Malcolm and faced in front of his children, it doesn't go away. Every holiday is the same. Every birthday is the same. It doesn't dissipate because of the number of years, losing him at 39. It doesn't go away. They still feel the pain. And we cannot alleviate, nor can we eradicate that pain. But we can do our job, and I'm going to do my job as the mayor of the city of New York, a place that he changed forever. We have a street in his name. Now let's live up to his name. Thank you very much.
As the mayor talked about things that happened that is wrong, which is also included this family, I thought about, as I looked out, how many years ago in 1990, this organization fought for 5 young men that were wrongfully coerced into saying that they had raped and beaten a white female in Central Park who was viciously raped and beaten, but not by them. And we fought for them, marched for them, and stood with them through their incarceration, and they were finally vindicated. and one of them is with us today. He joined the stage. He's now a city councilman, Yusef Salam of the Central Park 5. Why don't you come on the stage? This is another example of what happens to people which is why before any of the pundits get started on why is the mayor saying this is another example of you need to dig the facts and find out. We're not saying everybody is corrupt, but we're saying that those that were involved, whoever they are, should be dealt with. Now, I've fought all over this country with this brother and even other parts of the world. And he is the Attorney General of Black America. We have fought from the cases in Florida all the way to the George Floyd's, the 5th anniversary, Mr. Mayor, of his assassination is on this Sunday. And Ben and I will be in Houston at his gravesite. I preached the funerals and committed his body, buried him next to his mother, and we'll be there to have a service there with the family. Let us hear from the attorney, Benjamin Crump.
Thank you so much, Reverend Al, for your leadership. Thank you, Mayor Adams, for your leadership. Thank you so much, Councilman, for your perseverance. My heart was heavy listening to the mayor be personal about Malcolm X, because Malcolm made it possible for all of us people in the diaspora, the African diaspora, to have a sense of dignity and humanity and believe that we had a right to self-determination and self-worth, and that, as Dr. Shabazz said, that we declare our rights to be human beings, to be treated as human beings, to be given the rights as human beings by any means necessary. Amen. And so, as we sit here today on the 100th anniversary, I think about my great co-counsels, Attorney John Moore, who represented the Central Park 5 with other great lawyers, Attorney Flint Taylor, who represented the family of Fred Hampton, who was also slain by government authorities. There is, and Jared Presson and the Beha, great legal team, fighting for justice for Malcolm. I say this very simply, Reverend Al, as we respect and pay respect to the enduring legacy of Malcolm X, who only got to live on this earth for 39 years before he was killed by the people who pulled the trigger in the Audubon ballroom, but the other people who loaded the gun. The best way that we can pay homage to Malcolm X on his 100th birthday is to continue the fight for justice by any means necessary, to continue the fight for people to have dignity, the oppressed to be able to stand up against the oppressor, the exploited to be able to stand up against the exploiter, as Malcolm did, as nobody had ever done in history. We pay respect to the family, asking for justice and truth and transparency. Isn't that the least what we can do, to say happy birthday to Malcolm X? Thank you,
And let me say this, and I said there's a gala tonight, but many of you know, and the Mayor Eric knows, I was mentored, among others, by Reverend Jesse Jackson, who was close to the family. And he called me one day, and he said, Al, I know that y'all think I should be doing this, that, or the other. I grew up as youth director. He said, but you got to understand something. I said, what is that? He said, my generation, he was about generation, three-quarters generation ahead of me. He said, my generation saw Martin killed before he was 40, 39, Malcolm killed, he was 39, Medgar Evers was 39. All of them never saw 40. He said, I woke up one day, I was 55, I didn't know what to do because my role models never taught me how to get old. Eric Adams and I have gotten over 55. The least we could do is thank God we saw our children become grown. So we owe it to the children that didn't make it to make sure justice is done for them. This could have been our daughters. Our daughters could have suffered what they've had to suffer all their life. So it's personal for me. Justice has to come for them because I would have wanted somebody to fight for my daughters. And their mother had to fight and walk alone many years. There is no Malcolm without us honoring Betty. And she, as I said, she paid the first couple of years education for my daughters. I'm promising I'm gonna make sure her daughters get paid for what they did to their father. Any questions? And I'm only taking questions from the media and only on this subject. If you got something else you wanna ask Ben about or the mayor about, you can do it at your press conference. This is mine. This is about Malcolm only. Come on, Rabbi.
I'm live on TV, sir, and I want to ask a question. My program is live.
Are you going to announce it twice, or are you going to ask a question?
I want to ask a question. Yes. Since most of the records of the other people who were assassinated, records are released, I was wanting to know with the good mayor if we could get the records of the NYPD that was involved in the assassination of Malcolm released to the public, and why is it not that we're demanding that President Trump not release the records of Malcolm X?
We have formally requested that the FBI release the Malcolm X papers, just as they have released the papers on JFK, RFK, and MLK. That request has been formalized, and thank you for your question, because on this 100th birthday, we renew that request to the federal government.
Any other questions?
Hi, I work for a Dutch paper, Volkskrant. How do you defend the rights of Black Americans in this Trump era with all the
And I think, again, that's a little off subject, but we all fight in various ways. We can talk about that in another forum. I do not want to make the centennial of Malcolm about how I feel about Donald Trump, because you already know.
Thank you, Reverend Al. Say to Alani with the Positive Community Magazine. The question simply is, with all this artificial intelligence and information that we have accumulated over the decades, how do we move forward to create the justice, not just for Malcolm and Martin Luther King, but everybody?
I think Malcolm said it best, whether it's using social media, technology, AI, or mainstream media, by any means necessary. That's how we fight. I'll take one more.
Maria Kamenagi, my Harlem portrait. I want to first to say to Yasa and Malak that we love them. Your father has been an inspiration. You know, I mean, in New York and in Harlem because of him. So I want to ask Mr. Trump and and the mayor, how long do you think it's going to take to get justice now? Because it's taking too many years.
First, it's not lost on me the diversity of the media that's here. Local press rules. I think that legacy media has had a long history of not properly recording of this information, and so I'm happy to see the local press here from various ethnic groups and backgrounds. Right now, our corporation counsel this is in their hands. They're doing a process that is part of communicating with the legal team. But what we're not going to do is allow this to drag out. And as the mayor, I'm going to continue to ensure that this family receives the justice, and we don't want to do anything that's going to get in the way of doing that. But it is in the hands of the Corp Council right now.
Anybody else is just going to say a brief word?
So we had a conversation with our illustrious mayor, and we believe that he is going to help us get justice.
Before we close and the mayor goes, we want to bring out a birthday cake celebrating Malcolm X. And we're going to let everybody, if you take a slice of this cake, it's going to change you from being a cynical reporter to a fighter for justice.
Maybe we're gonna step down, let the girls down. Back up. They won't be, they didn't want to get the top of the cake.
Down.
Okay, help. Rev, you might have to say happy birthday, Rev. Right here.
We're not going there. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Malcolm. Happy birthday to you. We'll never forget.
Wow. Thank you all. We will see you at the Shabazz Center this evening at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.